Brexit.
What if the people who voted for Brexit had to pay more taxes to fund the fallout?
Brexit.
Should voting have individual consequences?
Brexit.
If things go badly for the country, you share the consequences with everybody else.
Brexit.
Brexit has failed.
Brexit.
Should voting have individual consequences?
Brexit and the ongoing impact of Liz Truss's mini budget, all of those things have weighed heavily on the UK economy.
Recently I was talking to someone and they said something that made me pause. What they said was, why should we pay the price for Brexit when we didn't even vote for it? And I'll admit, I think it's a reasonably fair question, and they used two metrics to point out just why they thought Brexit was in their eyes a failure, and these were the economy, its size and growth since 2016, and migration and how many people are actually coming to the UK since officially leaving the EU in January 2020. And they used those metrics to show that Brexit hasn't gone the way Brexit campaigners promised. The economy's grown slower than comparable countries, and migration, ironically, hasn't fallen. If anything, it's shifted. It's shifted upwards with fewer Europeans and more people from outside the Eurozone. So when this person said, we didn't vote for this, so why should we pay for it? It got me thinking. What if the people who voted for Brexit had to pay more taxes to fund the fallout? It's a bit out there, I know, but let's play with the idea for a second. So, let's say, hypothetically, we divided Britain into two tax groups, those who voted to leave and those who voted to remain. The leavers, well, they pay a little more in taxes because the decision that they backed caused measurable economic losses to the country, and those that voted to remain don't. So, how does that sound? Well, it sounds good to me because I didn't vote to leave, but it does reach to a deeper question. Should voting have individual consequences? Because right now, voting doesn't really cost anything. You walk into a booth, you tick a box, and then you go about your business. If things go badly for the country, you share the consequences with everybody else, whether they voted for it or not. But what it felt like that person was really saying was, why do we all share equal punishment for unequal responsibility? And that to me gets to the heart of the debate. Let's look back at those two metrics I mentioned earlier for a second, the economy and migration. In October 21, the UK government's own Office of Budget Responsibility calculated that Brexit could cost the UK economy 4% of its GDP per annum, although they say they could revise this. This figure was still being quoted on the BBC Verify site, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. And when it comes to migration, the number of non-EU migrants is triple that of EU migrants, with record numbers of migrants entering the country compared to the previous 10 years. That data you can find in the BBC article I mentioned earlier. So, by just those two metrics alone, Brexit has failed. It's failed spectacularly. And that's why this conversation matters, because it's not about demonising Brexit voters or people that hold different opinions or viewpoints that they have expressed. That's fine and that's their right. But that doesn't mean votes should be consequence-free. So let's get back to the question. Should voting have individual consequences? And here's why I think yes, it should do. If your vote has no tangible cost to you, you can't perceive it has any effect on your life, you can vote emotionally, you can vote out of anger, out of protest, or even out of misinformation because you'll never perceive the weight of it personally. But imagine if votes did carry some form of consequence. We'll say for the sake of this argument, a financial component. Maybe if a voter votes in a way that harms the economy of the country, maybe they do have to pay a little extra tax to make up the shortfall. Suddenly, people would think differently. Voting would mean something more than a slogan on a bus. It would mean pounds in your pocket. Or less pounds in your pocket. Democracy is fragile when there's no personal stake in its outcomes. It's why it needs so much accountability to function properly. If voters can be swayed by disinformation, lies or manipulation, and then face no consequence for acting on them, then bad actors have free rein to run riot and ruin our society. But if there's accountability, if society knows votes matter beyond the ballot box, people might become more cautious about who and what they believe. Demagogues sponsored by Russian money may have less destructive influence on our society. In other words, consequence doesn't just discipline voters, it protects our democracy from being hijacked. No one gets everything right, and yes, I've taken a few digs at Brexit to highlight a point, but if those who make reckless political choices bear even a fraction of the cost, then society might avoid dangerous extremes. Think of it like insurance. If your actions carry a risk, you pay a premium. If you drive dangerously, your insurance goes up. But in politics, if you drive the entire country off a cliff, then everyone pays the same bill, and that is, to a certain degree, problematic. So, let's bring it full circle. Should Brexit voters pay more taxes, Rachel?
Brexit and the ongoing impact of Liz Truss's mini budget, all of those things have weighed heavily on the UK economy.
Maybe there's a lesson here, because what that question really exposes is a flaw in how we think about our democracy. We treat voting like a right, and it is, but we really treat it with the responsibility and accountability that it truly deserves. And should voting have individual consequences? Definitely. There needs to be more accountability within all the mechanisms that make up our democracy, whether that's with our politicians, with our media moguls, and with the very electorate itself, just to name a few. But what that looks like, I'm not sure. Maybe the next evolution of democracy isn't just access, it's more accountability. Some form of consequence that ensures voters are informed, sincere, and rooted in collective good, and not individual impulse, because if voters can change their lives now, and for those yet to vote, and they do, then maybe they should carry a little more accountability. So, what do you think? Should voters face some kind of consequence for the outcomes that they choose, or would that destroy the idea of democracy itself? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Thank you for your time, guys, and be good.